Drive the Nail Through the Coffin. How to End a Bad Habit Forever by David Russo. Introduction. You didn't find this book by accident. You're here because something in your life has overstayed its welcome, a habit you've explained, justified, negotiated with, and promised to quit more times than you can count. You know its patterns. You know the damage. You know how this story goes, and yet it's still here. This book is not about trying harder. It's not about white-knuckling your way through cravings or pretending motivation will save you this time. You've already tried that. It didn't work, not because you're weak, but because willpower was never meant to carry this kind of weight. This book is about endings. Most people never end their bad habits. They pause them, they manage them, they take breaks and call it progress. They say things like I'm cutting back, or I'm working on it, or I'll quit when things calm down. What they're really doing is keeping the door cracked open, just enough for the habit to come back. When life gets heavy, endings don't work like that. An ending is clean, an ending is final, an ending doesn't argue or negotiate, an ending doesn't need daily motivation. Once something is truly over, you don't spend energy resisting it. You move on because there's nothing left to resist. That's what this book is for. You're not here to reduce a habit. You're here to bury it. Think about how much effort you've spent trying to stop. The planning, the rules, the guilt, the mental noise. Now imagine redirecting all of that energy toward a single, firm decision. One that doesn't depend on mood, stress level, or tomorrow's optimism. This is where most self-improvement gets it wrong. It tells you to fight the habit every day, to wake up and recommit endlessly, to treat relapse as proof that something is broken in you. That approach keeps you stuck in a cycle of hope and disappointment, effort and shame. This book takes a different stance. Instead of asking, how do I control myself better? We ask, why is this still allowed in my life at all? Instead of focusing on behavior, we focus on identity. Instead of willpower, we build systems. Instead of perfection, we build fast recovery. And instead of endlessly trying, we decide. Decision is the difference between a habit that lingers and one that's dead. When something is dead by decision, you don't romanticize it. You don't defend it. You don't tell stories about how it used to help. You acknowledge what it cost you, what it's still costing you, and you stop paying that price. That doesn't mean this will be easy. Endings rarely are, but it does mean it will be simpler than what you've been doing. Cleaner, quieter, more honest. Throughout this book, you'll hear a single idea return again and again, from different angles, in different moments, especially when things get uncomfortable. This habit ends here, not someday, not after one last time, not when conditions are perfect. Here, by the time you reach the final chapter, you won't be looking for motivation. You won't be asking for permission. You'll be ready for a moment of commitment that turns this from an intention into a line you don't cross. This is not about becoming a better version of the same person. It's about becoming someone who no longer lives with this habit at all. Let's begin the funeral. Chapter 1. The Funeral. This is not the chapter where you hype yourself up. This is not the chapter where you promise to try harder this time. This is the chapter where you end something. Take a breath, not to calm yourself, just to arrive. You already know why you're here. You didn't open this book out of curiosity. You opened it because there is a habit in your life that has crossed the line from coping mechanism to liability, something that once felt useful, comforting, or harmless but no longer is. Today, we stop pretending otherwise. Every ending needs a moment where it becomes real, not symbolic, not dramatic, real. That's what this chapter is. A funeral is not about anger or regret. It's about acknowledgement, about saying, this chapter of my life is over, and meaning it. Most people never do this with their bad habits. They keep them alive through loopholes, through maybes, through just in case. They say goodbye with one foot still in the room, and so the habit never actually dies. It just waits. We're not doing that here. This habit does not need more understanding. It does not need another explanation. It does not need one last chance. It has had enough time, enough grace, enough benefit of the doubt. You're not standing here because you failed to quit before. You're standing here because you finally stopped negotiating. That's an important distinction. Willpower is what people lean on when they haven't decided yet. Willpower is what you use when you're still arguing with yourself. When you secretly believe the habit still has something to offer you, you try to overpower it, and you lose over and over because you're fighting something you're still attached to. Endings don't require willpower. You don't need discipline to avoid something you no longer consider an option. You don't need motivation to not do what you've already decided is over. Once a line is drawn, energy shifts. The internal debate ends. The noise quiets. I learned this lesson from a small but stubborn habit, one that a male friend struggled with for years. Nail biting, stress, boredom, watching television. Reading his fingers would end up in his mouth before he even noticed. He tried little promises, awareness, catching himself mid-bite. None of it worked, because he wasn't ending the habit. He was negotiating with it. Finally, he made a different decision. Not try to stop, not cut back. He quit. Completely. Cold turkey. He even used one of those bitter nail coatings people use to break the habit. The taste was awful, exactly the point. Every time his hand drifted toward his mouth, that bitter reminder was waiting. And something interesting happened. Once the decision was final, the debate disappeared. His brain stopped negotiating. Nail biting simply stopped being something he did. Some habits only end when the decision is absolute. You see this with alcohol. Many people who quit drinking know they cannot have just one. One drink opens the door again. One exception restarts the argument. So, the rule becomes simple. Not one. Not ever. That's what an ending looks like. So let's be honest. Without drama and without self-punishment, this habit has run its course. Whatever role it once played, relief, distraction, escape, reward, it now takes more than it gives. And it will continue to take until you stop letting it. Pause for a moment and notice something important. You are not angry at yourself right now. You are clear. Clarity is what endings are built on. This is the point where many books would tell you to visualize a better future, or list your reasons, or get excited about change. That comes later. Right now, excitement would actually weaken the moment. Excitement fades. Decisions don't. Instead, you're doing something quieter and stronger. You're acknowledging reality. You're acknowledging that this habit is not misunderstood. It is not waiting to be managed correctly. It is not going to magically become harmless later. It ends because you say it ends. Say this not out loud yet, just internally, and notice what it feels like. This habit ends here. No emotion required. No fireworks. Just a statement of fact. You might feel resistance. That's normal. Resistance doesn't mean the decision is wrong. It means the habit knows it's losing access. Let that resistance be there without arguing with it. You're not here to convince every part of you. You're here to lead. Funerals are not rushed. They're deliberate. In the chapters ahead, we'll dismantle the lies that kept this habit alive. We'll expose the real cost. We'll build systems that make relapse harder and recovery faster. We'll replace what this habit pretended to provide. But none of that works if this moment stays theoretical. So before you move on, let this chapter do its job. This habit had a beginning. It had a middle. And now, because you decided it has an end, you don't need to hate it. You don't need to fear it. You don't need to fight it every day. You only need to stop giving it a future. Take one more breath, and when you're ready, continue not as someone trying to quit, but as someone who has already chosen where this story stops. This habit ends here. Chapter 2. The Lie You've Been Living With. Bad habits don't survive on pleasure alone. They survive on stories. If this habit were only uncomfortable, only damaging, only destructive, you would have walked away from it long ago. What kept it alive wasn't the behavior itself, it was the narrative wrapped around it, the quiet explanations you've repeated so often they started to sound like truth. This chapter isn't about blame, it's about exposure, because once a lie is named clearly, it loses its power. The first lie sounds confident. I can stop anytime. You've told yourself this to feel in control, to prove you weren't dependent, to believe the habit was a choice, not a necessity. But if stopping were truly easy, it wouldn't still be here. You wouldn't need rules, conditions, countdowns, or promises to yourself. Control that's never exercised isn't control, it's postponement. The second lie sounds compassionate. It helps me cope. This one is dangerous because it feels kind. It frames the habit as a support system. A relief valve, a temporary solution to stress, loneliness, boredom, or pain. And maybe, once upon a time, it did help briefly, but coping mechanisms are meant to reduce damage, not create it. When the thing you use to survive starts quietly eroding your health, focus, confidence, or relationships, it's no longer coping, it's leaking. Then there's the most seductive lie of all: I'll quit later. Later is a fantasy that keeps you comfortable in the present. Later means not now, and not now feels safe. Later assumes there will be a cleaner moment, a calmer season, a version of you with fewer responsibilities and more energy. But later has no calendar. It never arrives. It only keeps moving as long as the habit remains. These lies didn't make you weak. They made the habit feel reasonable. That's how it stayed. Notice how each story removes urgency. Anytime means no deadline. It helps me cope means it's necessary. Later means there's no consequence today. Together, they create a fog where nothing ever has to end. This is where we shatter the romance. There is nothing mysterious or misunderstood about this habit anymore. You know exactly how it works. You know how it starts, how it escalates, and how it ends with regret, numbness, or that familiar promise to do better tomorrow. The habit doesn't surprise you. It repeats itself. That repetition is the truth. And here's the part that might sting, but also sets you free. If something consistently makes your life smaller, it doesn't deserve a beautiful story. You don't owe this habit loyalty because it was once useful. You don't owe it gratitude because it got you through a rough season. Tools are meant to be put down when they no longer serve the job. Keeping them out of sentimentality is how you get hurt. Let this land without judgment. You weren't lying because you're dishonest. You were lying because the truth would have demanded an ending. And endings are uncomfortable. But now, something has changed. You're no longer asking whether the habit is good or bad, helpful or harmful, manageable or excessive. You're asking a simpler, more honest question. Does this belong in the life I'm building? If the answer is no, then the stories don't matter anymore. Say this quietly to yourself and feel the shift it creates. This habit ends here. When that sentence becomes true, the lies lose their function. They don't need to be argued with. They don't need to be disproven daily. They simply stop being relevant. In the next chapter, we'll stop talking about stories and look directly at consequences, the real, measurable cost of keeping this habit alive. Not to scare you, not to shame you, but to replace fog with clarity. For now, let this be enough. You don't need a better excuse to quit. You don't need more evidence. You don't need permission. You only needed to see the lie for what it was. And now that you have, there's no going back to believing it. Chapter 3. The real cost, no sugarcoating. If this habit were only costing you a little pleasure, this book wouldn't exist. You could afford it. You would tolerate it. You would call it a flaw and move on. But that's not what's happening. This habit is expensive, and not just in obvious ways. Some of the damage shows up on statements and calendars. Some of it never gets measured, which makes it easier to ignore until you slow down long enough to tell the truth. So let's do that now. Calmly, clearly, without exaggeration and without mercy. Start with time. Think about the minutes that turn into hours. The just one more moments that quietly eat your evenings. The mornings where you wake up foggy, rushed, or already behind because of something you chose the night before. Time is the one thing you never get back, and this habit has been taking it in small, unnoticeable cuts. You don't feel robbed. You feel busy, and that's worse. Now money, even if the number isn't catastrophic, it's consistent. Small payments that add up to months of rent, years of savings, or opportunities you talked yourself out of because now isn't the time. Money isn't just currency, it's stored effort, and this habit has been siphoning off effort you could have invested in your future. Then there's health. Not the dramatic kind you tell yourself you'll deal with later. The quiet erosion, sleep quality, energy levels, focus, stress recovery. The way your body feels just a little heavier than it should, a little more inflamed, a little more tired. Health damage rarely announces itself. It accumulates until one day you realize your baseline has shifted, and you don't remember when. Confidence is where the cost really sharpens. Every time you do the thing you said you wouldn't do, you teach yourself a lesson. Not consciously, but internally, the lesson is simple and brutal. My word doesn't matter. Over time, that message leaks into everything. You hesitate more. You trust yourself less. You shrink goals before you even try because some part of you expects to let yourself down. That's not a motivation problem. That's a credibility problem with yourself. And then there are relationships. Maybe no one knows the full extent of this habit. Or maybe they do. And it's created distance, tension, or quiet disappointment. Even when it's hidden, it still affects how present you are, how patient you are, how available you are. Habits that drain you don't stay contained. They spill. Here's the part most people avoid. This cost is ongoing. Whatever this habit has already taken, it plans to take more. It doesn't plateau. It doesn't say, that's enough. The future cost is not hypothetical, it's predictable. Same patterns, same trade-offs, same regret, just in a different season of your life. Sit with that for a moment. Not to punish yourself, but to wake yourself up. You don't need to imagine a worst-case scenario. You only need to imagine this continuing unchanged. Another year of it. 5, 10. The same internal conversations. The same resets. The same quiet disappointment that never quite resolves. That's the price of not deciding. Now here's the shift. You are not broken for having paid this cost. You're human. Habits don't drain you because you're stupid or weak. They drain you because they're designed to. What matters now is not what you've lost, but whether you're willing to keep paying. Because the moment you stop paying, the moment you decide the cost is no longer acceptable, something changes. The habit loses leverage. It can offer comfort, distraction, escape, but it can't justify itself anymore. Say it again, and let it land deeper this time. This habit ends here. Not because you're angry, not because you're scared, but because you finally looked at the bill. In the next chapter, we'll dismantle the idea that this cost exists because you lack willpower. You don't. And once you understand why willpower was never the solution, you can stop blaming yourself and start building something that actually works. For now, honor this clarity. You see what it costs, you know what it takes, and you're done paying. Chapter 4. Why willpower always fails. You've probably tried it before, telling yourself, just don't do it today, just 1 week, just 1 month. You tightened your grip, counted the hours, repeated the mantra, resisted the urge, and eventually inevitably you slipped. Maybe once, maybe 100 times, and every time, the habit reminded you, you're not strong enough. That's the lie. Willpower doesn't fail because you're weak. It fails because it's not a strategy, it's a reaction. It's what we lean on when we haven't made a decision, when the habit still holds a secret place in our minds, when we're negotiating with ourselves instead of leading ourselves. Willpower burns out because it requires constant energy. Habits don't. They are effortless patterns waiting for the right trigger. Think about it. Have you ever run out of willpower in the middle of a habit, but the habit never runs out of energy? That's not coincidence. That's design. Let's be honest with why this happens. Your environment matters more than your mindset. The triggers, the stress, the boredom, the social cues, the notifications, the smells, the sights, the routines are constantly nudging you back. Your brain doesn't care that you want to quit. It cares about what's automatic, familiar, and rewarding. You're trying to fight thousands of small, invisible forces with a single, finite tool, your discipline. That's why it always fails. Your systems matter more than your promises. If you only rely on willpower, you're asking a human brain to override centuries of evolution, thousands of learned associations, and dozens of contextual cues all in real time. Systems, routines, and identity shifts do the heavy lifting instead. They don't require heroics. They require design. Your rules matter more than your guilt. Shame is the worst feedback loop. It tells you should have done better, which makes you feel bad, which makes the habit more appealing, which makes you do it again, which makes you feel worse. Willpower alone can't escape this cycle. Only structure can. Only strategy can. Only a real decision can. Here's the key truth. Quitting a habit is not about being stronger. It's about being smarter. It's about redesigning the conditions, replacing the triggers, and aligning your environment with the future self you want to become. You don't need a heroic struggle, you need a system. where struggle becomes unnecessary. The good news: you're capable of that. You don't need more grit. You need clarity, design, and the courage to stop negotiating. Repeat it silently. Let it sink in. I don't fail because I'm weak. I fail because I've relied on the wrong tools. That's liberating. That's freedom. That's the point where shame ends and strategy begins. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the traps, the emotional, environmental, and social triggers that keep habits alive, and show you how to notice them without obsessing over them. Awareness is the bridge between old patterns and new choices. For now, remember this: willpower is not your weapon. Decision, systems, and identity are. This habit ends here. Chapter 5. The Trigger Trap. Habits don't exist in a vacuum. They thrive on triggers, subtle signals that flip the switch before you even realize it. And until you understand those triggers, willpower alone will always fail. Because the habit isn't waiting for permission, it's waiting for the cue. Triggers come in three main forms: emotional, environmental, and social. Emotional triggers are the easiest to overlook. Stress, boredom, sadness, anxiety, even fleeting impatience can summon the habit automatically. You might think, I'm doing this because I want to, but often it's a shortcut to relief, a silent signal telling your brain, do the thing that feels familiar. Emotional triggers feel urgent, personal, and unavoidable, but the moment you learn to pause and recognize them, something important happens. You reclaim choice. Environmental triggers are everywhere: your couch, your phone, the smell of coffee, the routines that start your day. These cues silently program your behavior. A habit doesn't need coercion to survive. It needs repetition, access, and opportunity. I learned this lesson early in life with something I genuinely loved: Dungeons and Dragons. For a while, I was completely absorbed in it. My friends and I would spend hours building characters, rolling dice, and running through campaigns. I loved the creativity. I loved the storytelling. If we weren't playing, I was thinking about the next session. But my parents noticed that my schoolwork was slipping. My attention was drifting from responsibilities I couldn't ignore. So they did something simple. They took the game away. The habit disappeared not because my willpower suddenly improved, but because the environment changed. The triggers were gone. The routine had nothing left to attach itself to. The game was fantastic, but it couldn't exist at the expense of what really mattered. Later, I learned a similar lesson with a different game system in the 1980s. Long before the word viral existed, I became #1 on the system, talked about all over school, and even charged subscriptions before the term had meaning. I loved it. It was creative, engaging, and rewarding. But I went too far. I stayed up all night, sometimes even sleeping in class. My parents stepped in, telling me to focus on school, and eventually, the system itself short-circuited when a chip was added to the motherboard. That experience taught me an important truth. Not every habit is bad. Some are brilliant. Some are inspiring. But even good habits need boundaries. Enjoyment is valuable, but it can't replace responsibility. The lesson I learned then is one I carry now in my writing, my audiobooks, and my life. Pursue what you love, but make it work for you, not against you. Social triggers are the quiet influencers. Friends who normalize the habit, coworkers who participate in it, family members who unintentionally reinforce it. These influences shape behavior without you even noticing. Humans are wired to follow the group. When the group treats a habit as normal, it feels normal to you too. When the group changes, your behavior often changes with it. Recognizing social triggers isn't about cutting people out. It's about protecting your decisions from unconscious influence. Awareness is the first weapon against triggers. Watch for patterns without obsession. Notice the moments you reach for the habit. Notice what you're feeling. Notice where you are. Notice who is around you. Don't judge. Just observe. Awareness alone doesn't stop the habit, but it creates something powerful, a gap. And inside that gap, choice exists. Once you see the triggers clearly, you can start designing defenses. Rearrange your environment. Remove cues. Insert routines that support the person you're becoming. Here's the truth many people miss. The habit isn't strong because you're weak. It's strong because it has been responding automatically to triggers for too long. Remove the automatic response, and the habit begins to lose its grip. Say it now and feel what it means. I notice the triggers. I choose my response. This habit ends here. In the next chapter, we move even deeper because the most powerful way to end a habit in just changing behavior. It's changing identity. Awareness is the bridge. Identity is the destination. Chapter 6. Identity over behavior. Here's a truth most self-help advice ignores. You don't quit a habit by doing something different. You quit it by becoming someone different. Behavior follows identity, not the other way around. You don't stop smoking because you resist a craving. You stop smoking because you see yourself as a non-smoker. You don't stop binging, procrastinating, or scrolling endlessly because of discipline alone. You stop because your identity no longer allows it. Habits stick because they're tied to who you believe you are. Every time you say, "I'm just someone who," you reinforce a version of yourself that includes that habit. The problem isn't your lack of effort. It's that your self-image still contains it. You can try harder all day, but until you shift the story you tell yourself, your actions will follow the old script. So, where does the shift begin? With language. The words you use to describe yourself are tiny anchors for identity. Saying, "I'm trying to quit" signals uncertainty. Saying, "I'm a person who doesn't do this" signals finality. That one small change in self-talk rewires the way your mind interprets triggers, cravings, and opportunities. Next comes behavior, but in service of identity. Every action you take is a vote for the version of yourself you want to become. Skipping one late-night indulgence, putting down your phone when bored, taking a walk instead of giving in. These are not just isolated victories. They are statements of who you are. Every vote counts. Eventually, the habit doesn't need to be fought. It's incompatible with who you are. Identity also shields you from relapse. When the habit returns as temptation, you don't ask, "Can I resist it?" You ask, "Would someone like me do this?" The question is no longer about willpower. It's about alignment. The more your identity carries the answer, the less your old habit can sneak back in. This is the pivot most people miss. You're not modifying behavior temporarily. You're rewriting the lens through which your mind interprets life. You're deciding that the old version of you, the one that engaged in this habit, is no longer the person you are. That's powerful because once identity shifts, resistance becomes unnecessary. The habit stops on its own. Pause and make it personal. Say it quietly, with conviction. "I am the kind of person who doesn't do this." Notice how it feels in your chest. That is the foundation. Actions, systems, and strategies will reinforce it, but this statement is the seed. Plant it, nurture it, and your habits will follow. Next, we'll explore the replacement rule. What fills the space the habit once occupied? Because nature hates a vacuum, and if you leave it empty, something else will rush in. But if you choose wisely, that space becomes the launch pad for the life you actually want. Chapter 7. The Replacement Rule. Here's a simple but powerful truth. Nature hates a vacuum. Habits don't die quietly. When one disappears, the space it occupied wants to be filled. If you leave it empty, something else, often a weaker or less helpful impulse, will rush in. That's why so many people quit a habit only to replace it with another that costs them just as much. The replacement rule is simple. You don't just remove a habit, you replace it with something better. Something that serves the person you're becoming, not the person you used to be. Start by identifying what the habit gave you. Relief, excitement, distraction, comfort, social connection. Every habit has a function. The clearer you understand it, the easier it becomes to find a healthier alternative. Here's the difference between quitting and replacing. Awareness. The moment you notice yourself falling into a non-productive action, pause. Don't just resist it, actively choose the replacement, because you know the payoff. You aren't leaving space for failure. You're voting for your new identity. Design your replacement carefully, not a temporary patch, not a weak substitute, something that meets the need fully, immediately, and sustainably. Feeling stressed? Swap scrolling or snacking with a deliberate walk, a few minutes of deep breathing, or a productive microtask. Boredom creeping in? Reach for a creative activity, a short journal entry, or a learning exercise. Make it simple enough to implement in the moment, but meaningful enough to feel satisfying. Automaticity is key. The new habit must respond to the same triggers the old one did, or you'll default back. If you always reached for the habit after lunch, put your replacement within arm's reach at that time. If anxiety triggered it, make your replacement the first thing you notice when stress hits. Your goal is just resistance you want natural, almost effortless redirection. This isn't about perfection. Some replacements will fail. Some days, the old habit may push back. That's expected. What matters is having a plan ready so that when the habit arises, you don't pause, negotiate, or rely on willpower. You act, you replace, you strengthen yourself in real time. Think of it this way: if habits are spaces in your life, the replacement is the furniture you choose. Leave the room empty, and clutter moves in. Fill it intentionally, and the old habit loses the space it once occupied. Say it now, with clarity. I replace what no longer serves me with what strengthens me. This is how a habit dies, not by fighting, not by guilt, not by struggle, but by leaving it no room to exist. Next, we'll address relapse not as failure, but as part of the process. Even with replacements in place, slips happen. The difference is knowing how to recover fast, without losing momentum, without giving the habit back its power. You've cleared the space. Now it's time to furnish it. Chapter 8. Relapse without collapse. Here's the reality most people refuse to face. Quitting a habit is rarely a straight line. Even with awareness, identity, and replacements in place, slips will happen. You might give in once, twice, or even after months of progress. That doesn't mean failure. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human, and that's okay. Relapse is not the enemy. It's information. It tells you what triggers are stronger than you realized, which replacements aren't working, or where your systems need reinforcement. Every slip is a chance to adjust, learn, and strengthen your defenses, not a reason to abandon the whole effort. The first rule of relapse is don't personalize it. You didn't fail as a person. You failed in a system. Habits thrive in environments, routines, and triggers. When a relapse occurs, don't attack yourself. Attack the conditions that allowed it. Examine the triggers without judgment. Identify the gaps in your plan, then close them. The second rule is recover fast. The longer you linger in guilt, shame, or I've blown it, might as well start over tomorrow. The more power the habit regains. The moment you slip, pause, reset, and re-engage your replacement strategy. Say the mantra. Reaffirm your identity. Act immediately. The faster you get back on track, the less the habit wins. The third rule is refuse perfection as a requirement. Waiting for a perfect day, a perfect mindset, or a perfect streak is a trap. Progress is not linear. It is messy, inconsistent, and sometimes humiliating. But if you keep showing up, if you keep voting for the person you want to become, small actions compound into permanent change. Relapse becomes dangerous only when it triggers. Collapse when one slip spirals into giving up entirely. That's why preparation matters. Know your triggers. Have your replacements ready. Rehearse your identity. Then, when the slip comes, you respond, not react. You don't negotiate with the habit. You correct course. Take a deep breath and repeat quietly. A slip is not my story. My decision continues. This habit ends here. This mindset transforms relapse from a moment of shame into a moment of power. Each time you recover, you strengthen your systems, reinforce your identity, and tighten the coffin lid just a little more. In the next chapter, we'll drive the nail home. We'll turn all this preparation, awareness, identity, and replacement work into a symbolic, emotional commitment that stops the habit for good. Because strategy and preparation are powerful, but nothing seals the ending like a decision you feel in your body as well as your mind. Slips are temporary. Decisions are permanent. Chapter 9. The nail. This is it. The moment you've been building toward. The moment where the habit stops being almost dead and becomes definitively over. You've done the work: awareness, identity, replacements, relapse strategies, but now it's time for a ritual, a commitment, a symbolic act that turns decision into reality. This is where you drive the nail through the coffin. A nail isn't about effort. It's about finality. One deliberate strike, and the habit is no longer negotiable. One act, and your brain, your body, and your environment recognize that the old pattern is over. This is not dramatic. It is not performative. It is decisive. Start by making it tangible. Write it down, on paper, in a journal, or even in a note on your phone. Declare, this habit ends here. I am the person who does not do this. Seeing it solidifies it. Writing externalizes your decision, moving it from thought into reality. Next, speak it. Say it aloud to yourself, slowly, clearly. Let the words pass through your body. Let them settle in your chest, your throat, your mind. Speaking it creates resonance. You are no longer negotiating silently, you are declaring publicly, even if only to yourself. Then, decide it. Not try it. Not hope for it. Decide it. Let your mind understand that the question is over. The debate is done. The habit has no future. This is the moment when your identity, your replacements, and your systems converge. You are no longer someone attempting to quit. You are someone who has quit. This ritual may feel strange. It may feel small or awkward. That is exactly why it works. Habit relies on familiarity, repetition, and comfort. By creating a deliberate, symbolic action outside of routine, you disrupt the old pattern and embed the new reality. After this moment, the habit will try to return. It may whisper, push, or nag. That is normal. But every time it appears, your ritual, your nail, is there to remind you, this ends here. Your identity supports it. Your replacements reinforce it. Your strategy makes relapse temporary, not permanent. Repeat your mantra quietly now. This habit ends here. I am not who I was. One, choose differently. Feel it, own it, let it settle. Let it resonate in your body. This is the strike that makes everything else the awareness. The replacement, the identity real. Without it, change can linger in theory. With it, change is undeniable. Next, we'll explore what life looks like beyond this habit. What freedom feels like. What confidence grounded in choice looks like. Because the coffin is closed, but the life you build after it has just begun. You've driven the nail. The habit is over, and the space it leaves is yours. Chapter 10. Living past the grave. The habit is dead. You've driven the nail. You've done the work. Identity, replacements, awareness, recovery. Now comes the quietest, most profound part. Living past the grave. Freedom is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't require validation or approval. It's the subtle shift in your daily choices. The calm confidence of someone who no longer negotiates with themselves. You wake up without the internal tug of war, without that familiar shadow pulling at your attention. Life feels a little wider, a little lighter, a little more yours. Notice the space that's been created. Time you once lost, energy you once spent on resistance, mental bandwidth you once devoted to cravings or shame. That space is now yours to fill deliberately with purpose, creativity, health, and joy. The habit's coffin is closed, but the room it leaves is a blank canvas. What you build there is entirely up to you. You may still face old triggers. They may test you. The smell, the notification, the stress that once summoned the habit. These moments are inevitable. But now, you respond from a different place. Not with struggle, not with guilt, not with maybe next time. You respond from identity. You respond from systems. You respond from someone who simply does not do that thing anymore. The habit has no authority over you. This is the quiet confidence of the person who has decided. You no longer need motivation to stay on track. You no longer negotiate with yourself. You move through life with a subtle but unwavering integrity. Actions aligned with identity. Decisions aligned with values. Living past the grave is also about new standards. You begin to expect more from yourself, not in judgment, but in alignment. Your boundaries tighten, your choices sharpen, your priorities become clearer. You no longer tolerate what once seemed acceptable, because it isn't compatible with who you are now. Finally, living past the grave is about freedom. Real freedom isn't indulgence. It isn't doing whatever you want. It's choosing deliberately, confidently, and without the chains of old habits. It's waking up each day and seeing that your decisions truly belong to you. Say it quietly, one last time. This habit ends here. I am free. One, choose differently. I live intentionally. That's the future you step into. Not perfect, not effortless, but yours. And in this space, The life you've been too distracted to create all along is waiting. You've closed one chapter, and now the next one is fully in your hands. You're past the grave, and everything beyond it is possible. Conclusion: the end and the beginning. You've come a long way. From acknowledgement to awareness. From identity to action. From slip-ups to recovery. You've done more than read a book. You've laid the foundation for permanent change. This isn't about a temporary streak, a fleeting burst of discipline, or a motivational high that fades. This is about finality. The habit is over because you decided it was. Change isn't about willpower. It's about clarity, design, and commitment. It's about understanding the triggers, dismantling the lies, replacing the void, and aligning your behavior with the identity of the person you want to be. You've done all of that, and now the habit has no room to exist. The coffin is closed, the nail is driven, but this is also the beginning. The end of one habit leaves space for growth, for freedom, for a life guided by deliberate choice instead of unconscious patterns. You now know that habits don't define you, your decisions do. And you've proven that permanent change is possible when you stop negotiating, stop blaming yourself, and stop leaving the outcome to chance. Remember this: life after a habit is not about perfection. It's about consistency, recovery, and alignment. It's about waking up every day with the quiet confidence that comes from integrity, from following through on what you said was over, from being someone who doesn't compromise on their standards. The freedom you've created is real, and it is yours to cultivate. Carry this forward. Let identity guide you. Let systems protect you. Let replacements sustain you. Let relapse teach you. And above all, let the quiet power of a decision fully made remind you daily. You are in control, and this habit ends here. The coffin is closed. The habit is dead, and the life waiting for you is bigger, freer, and more intentional than you ever allowed yourself to imagine. You've ended one story. Now it's time to write the next deliberately, boldly, and without hesitation. This is your life. This is your choice. This is your beginning.